third video on ancient wisdom for modern overwhelm. We got together this week and we talked about the second Buddha in the mandala of the five Buddhas, and this Buddha is called Amitabah. And often the way we introduce Amitabah is by thinking of a sunset. So we did a visualization practice together of a beautiful sunset. So quite a nice way to ease yourself into thinking about Amitabah is to close your eyes, think about the colours, the lights, the deep reds and the oranges, and just really kind of put yourself into that place of warmth and calm and infinite light. So when we talk about the colour of the Buddhas, often we're talking about a colour that's made of light rather than a specific solid colour. So a sunset is a really good example of this. A sunset isn't made up of a specific colour, it's made up of lots of different wavelengths of light that light up the sky. And when we're visualising Amitabah, we're visualising this kind of, just this red that's made up of light. It's luminous, it's not a fixed colour. So what I'm going to do in this video is repeat quite a lot of what I talked about on Monday night and just kind of reiterate those important features that I think that Amitabah can bring to our practice, and those features and characteristics that Amitabah can help us to bring about in our own being, help us to access those qualities that do exist in our being. And we're going to use Amitabah to help us to access those qualities and to bring them to the forth in order for us to be able to practice Amitabah, love and compassion in our day-to-day lives. So I'll start off tonight by going through the different features of Amitabah and the different symbols that are used and what those symbols are supposed to represent. So the first symbol that is represented by Amitabah is the symbol of the lotus. And the lotus flower is often used in Buddhism because it's something that grows up out of the mud. Okay, so it starts off in the thick mud under the water, and then gradually it grows up through the mud and comes out of the water, and then the stem comes right up out of the water and blossoms into this beautiful flower. And that beautiful flower is a symbol of spiritual receptivity. So when we talk about spiritual receptivity, we're talking about our innate ability to be receptive to the teachings of the Buddha, and our innate ability to be receptive to be able to be compassionate and to have this infinite love. The deep red colour of Amitabah, red is a colour of passion. It draws and attracts, it fascinates, and it's the colour of love, and it's also the colour of the life force. So it's the colour of the blood that runs through our veins, it's the colour of emotion, blushing, and it's also the colour of warmth, light and love. So it's like an infinite light and love, compassion that's represented through this colour red. Amitabah takes the full meditation posture, which speaks of stillness and peace. And he's got a gentle smile, which shows that within this stillness and peace, there's the powers of love and compassion that are shining through. So within the stillness, there is activity in that there is love and compassion happening within that stillness. Amitabah, from this point of view, talks about, when we talk about Amitabah, we're looking at our mundane unskillfulness. So irritabilities can be transformed by the Dharma. So I talked a little bit about my experience last year of feeling irritability over a course that I had to do. And that irritability lasted a long time. It began to become my story, and it began to cause quite a lot of suffering. And what I experienced within that suffering was I found ways to escape the suffering by trying to find positive emotion in things that were providing it for a short period of time but weren't really cutting it. And what I found was, if I was able to meet those needs in other ways, but through meditation and through devotional practice, I was actually able to get that positive emotion from a much more substantial and sort of permanent way, rather than kind of sitting down and reading a trashy novel and feeling good while I was reading it and then putting it down and still feeling that sense of irritability and dissatisfaction. So I was using those emotions of looking for that positive experience, and I was adding in meditation and devotional practice, which was helping me to direct my seeking for positive experience to something much more wholesome and more spiritual. So we talked about the idea of we're trying to water and nurture the bigger tree. So what I was experiencing was the smaller tree was the one that I kept going back to in order to avoid difficult, irritable emotions. But in the meantime, through doing the practice and the devotional stuff, I was able to cultivate a much bigger tree, which was the one that actually took over in the end, and the sort of unskillful behaviours just fell away naturally. So yeah, our desire for worldly things can be taken to a much higher level for desire for worldly truth and the cultivation of positive emotion, which was what I experienced when I changed those habits. So Akshobhya sits opposite Amitabha on the mandala, and he uses the Vajra to get through to the truth of the situation. So uses the Vajra to clear away the untruth and get to the truth and get to that mirror-like wisdom. Amitabha, on the other hand, is one of longing and desire and attraction for enlightenment. And the wisdom that Akshobhya has is the mirror-like wisdom, whereas the wisdom that Amitabha has is the discriminating wisdom. So discriminating wisdom sees things in their uniqueness and diversity. So, for example, when we've had a long spell of dry weather like we have, and we suddenly have a big rainfall, the rain falls onto everything and everything grows in its own uniqueness. So the grass grows into more beautiful grass. The trees grow into more beautiful trees. You don't see the grass trying to grow into a tree. So what Amitabha is seeing is the beauty and the diversity and the uniqueness within ourselves. And also looking at it from a discerning point of view of understanding that what the grass needs isn't necessarily the same as what the tree needs. So when we are looking at our own practice, we are becoming aware of the fact that what we need isn't necessarily going to be the same as what the person next to us needs. So when we kind of listen to these talks, we're able to take what we connect with out of them and take that into our day-to-day lives. And it might be completely different from what the people around you have found that they've connected with. So it also allows us to be more discerning in our own judgments as well. So our own conditioning means that when we go out in day-to-day life, we're making judgments about things and people and situations all of the time. And some of those judgments might be right, and some of them might be completely wrong. And what we're doing when we're evoking Amitabha is we're bringing around a discernment in our judgment. So, for example, a correct judgment might be, I'll go to bed early tonight in order to be able to be awake enough to do a meditation in the morning. So that's a positive discerning judgment. So I know that if I want to be able to practice regularly, I need to get a good night's sleep. An unhelpful judgment might be we walk down the street and we see someone and we smile at them and they don't smile back at us, and immediately we make a judgment about that person and about them being particularly unfriendly and things like that. It can quite often happen in traffic jams and things like that. If someone's not driving very well, immediately we can make a judgment about the type of driver they are and that they shouldn't be on the road and things like that. Whereas actually what might be happening is that person could be pretty distracted because they've just had some bad news, or they're having a particularly stressful day and they're just not being very mindful of what they're doing. So what we're trying to do is distinguish between our positive discerning judgments and the judgments that are actually quite unhelpful to ourselves and towards people. So the element of Amitabha is the fire element, and the fire element is the one that burns the impurities, and it transforms and gives off light and heat. So I sort of think as fire as the thing that goes through and it gets rid of all the rubbish, gets rid of the litter and the debris, and what's left is the pure substance at the end of it, and it's kind of transformative in that kind of way. And that's like the light and the heat and love that radiates from Amitabha's heart in his deep seat of meditation. So within that deep seat of meditation, there's that activity, that love within the stillness. So what we often find that we do, particularly when we're feeling overwhelmed, is that we overexert ourselves. We try to do too much. We run around trying to help people, trying to help charities, trying to go on marches and things like that. And what we actually find is that we hit burnout. Whereas Amitabah talks about that stillness and being able to use that stillness to do good in the world without getting that sort of compassionate fatigue. So I think about the solitary retreat that I went on. It was a retreat of activity in that there was a huge amount of spiritual activity going on. There was meditation, there was devotion, there was reading, reflection and things like that. But there was a real stillness in it, in that my telephone was switched off. I was having long periods of time where I was just doing nothing. And from the outside, it probably looked like very little was happening. But actually what I found when I came home at the end of the solitary was there was a peacefulness about me which spread throughout my whole family because of that stillness that I'd kind of found in myself, had that positive knock-on effect to everyone around me. So when we do listen to these talks, often we sit there and we say, yeah, that's great. Yeah, I really get that. I'm going to try that. But until we can find an emotional equivalent to our intellectual understanding, which is what we're kind of experiencing at the moment, we can't really get very far with these teachings. So what we want to do is actually to begin to cultivate loving kindness. So we want to cultivate these qualities that Amitabah is representing to us. And we do this by doing a meditation called the Metta Bhavana. So Metta means loving kindness and Bhavana means work. So what we're doing during this meditation is we're working to cultivate this loving kindness. And it's a loving kindness that we can tap into. So it's like a deep well. When we're doing our meditation, we're going deep down into our experience and we're tapping into something that's quite universal. It's a kindness and a love that's quite universal that we can tap into under the right conditions. And even if we're not feeling particularly loving and metaful at the time that we sit down, even the kind of the intention of sitting there to do the Metta Bhavana is a positive experience, and it all adds up towards this kind of drip, drip, drip of positive emotion. And what you tend to find when you start doing the meditation, the metta meditation regularly, is it does have a knock-on effect to your day-to-day life and how you interact with people. It also helps us to understand and to break down that separatedness that we experience between ourselves and others, and we begin to realise that actually we are all interconnected, which helps to kind of cultivate more of an empathy and an understanding for the people around us. We begin to identify with the human condition, that we're born, we live, we get old, we get sick and we die. And what we're doing with the Metta Bhavana is we're imaginatively putting ourselves into other people's shoes and being aware of the fact that their experience is actually very similar to our own experience, in that they want to be happy, and quite often their unskillful behaviours are just ways that they've learned to try and be happy, and they're just not that effective. In the same way of a lot of our behaviours are not that effective either. So a good thing to do over this week is to try and practice the Metta Bhavana meditation, and also have a look in areas of your life that perhaps you could be a bit kinder. Cultivate those friendly feelings towards people and then act out of those. And what we'll find is that under the right conditions, our kindness ultimately transcends the separateness that we feel between ourselves and others, and our empathy for others can be liberated as we go beyond ourselves. And this is what moves us into the Amitabah realm. So I hope you enjoy this week of practice, and I'm looking forward to finding how you get on when we meet together on the Monday session. And I'm going to try and get some recordings out to you of the Metta Bhavana meditation and the mindfulness of breathing meditation. I'll also pop in the comments box below the talk that a lot of this content came from, so if you want to explore further you can do. And I look forward to seeing you next Monday.